When Kevin and Miss Wilson arrived at the auction, Kevin chatted with Dalton for a few minutes before Phoebe showed up. Truman Anderson was there too, and so was Isaac Holden, the man her father wanted her to marry. Isaac took an immediate dislike to Kevin and started insulting him. Of course, Kevin responded sarcastically. "Come again? Do you think you're funny or something? Why don't you go someplace else?" Isaac growled at Kevin. "Hey, what's the annoying sound?" Dalton said as he pretended to clean his ear. "Who the hell are you?" Of course, Isaac didn't know who Dalton was. That was because their families didn't travel in the same circles. "I'm your worst nightmare," Dalton said as he glared at Isaac. "If you're not careful, you may not be able to walk out of here." "Dalton, don't get angry. This guy isn't worth wasting your breath on," Kevin warned him with a smile. "Oh, so you're friends with this useless freeloader? Well, I guess you can't be very important, can you?" Isaac said arrogantly. "As they say, birds of a feather flock together, so I guess that makes you trash too." "You know, you've got a really big mouth," Dalton replied. He was getting more and more angry at Isaac. "Why don't you try and shut it for me?" Isaac sneered. "But let me warn you, if you touch me, you'll be eating prison food for the rest of your life." Just as Isaac finished his threat, Dalton pushed him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. Everyone around them gasped when they saw this. Isaac sat on the floor struggling to catch his breath. "What the? What do you think you're doing?" Isaac whined as he tried to get up off the floor. Then he pointed at Dalton and shouted, "You'll pay for this." Dalton snarled as he stepped forward. "Please calm down, dear," Miranda said as she quickly pulled her husband back. "Kevin's right. This piece of trash isn't worth your time." She knew her husband's temper very well. He didn't waste time talking crap or posturing. If you started a fight with him, you'd better be ready to defend yourself because you're going to get hurt. When he saw the murderous look in Dalton's eyes, Isaac immediately pulled back his hand. He was so scared that he lost all his confidence. Fortunately, the fight was interrupted by the start of the auction. "Kevin, let's go in," Phoebe said excitedly. She didn't want to talk to Isaac anymore. "Okay." Kevin agreed as he sent a text to Miss Wilson. Then he put his arm on Dalton's shoulder and guided him into the main room of the auction house. You had to admit that the Pearl family had a lot of influence in Chicago. Their auction house was as big as a football stadium in a part of the city where every inch of land was worth a fortune. Kevin and Dalton decided not to sit in the seats up front that were reserved for Williams Media. They casually found seats in a different part of the hall and sat down. "Kevin, have you seen the list of everything they have up for bids?" Dalton asked as he confidently crossed his legs and looked around the room. "No. Why are you asking?" Kevin asked curiously. "I heard that there will be an auction for a batch of some newly developed herbal medicine, but no one knows its specific effects," Dalton said excitedly. When he heard this, Kevin's interest was immediately piqued. "Are you interested in bidding on it?" Just then, Phoebe walked over to Kevin. Pointing at the empty seat next to him, she asked, "Is anyone sitting here?" "Nope. Make yourself at home," Kevin said with a smile. Phoebe sat down, looked Kevin in the eyes, and said, "You could probably have anything you wanted at this auction, couldn't you?" Miranda smiled and spoke before Kevin could answer. "Miss Anderson, if I'm not mistaken, shouldn't your family have reserved seats in the front row?" When he heard this, a very enigmatic smile emerged on Dalton's face as his eyes swept back and forth between Kevin and Phoebe. "The first row is too boring," Phoebe said as she started to blush a little. "Yeah, the back row isn't stuffy at all," Dalton said teasingly. This made Phoebe blush even more. She really just wanted to sit with Kevin. How many days had it been since they came back from the camping trip? Phoebe had been worried about Kevin's injuries. How many messages had she sent him? But this damn man was so reserved that he didn't reply to any of them. When she thought about this, Phoebe started to feel a little resentful, and it showed on her face. "Why are you looking at me like that? I didn't say anything," Kevin said with a bewildered look. When they heard this, Dalton and his wife almost laughed out loud. Just then, Isaac found Phoebe in the crowd and walked up to her. "Phoebe, why are you sitting way back here? The lighting is so much better up front," Isaac said as he gave Kevin a snooty look. "Why the heck should you care about where I sit?" Phoebe said impatiently. Isaac knew he had said the wrong thing, so he shut his mouth and sat down next to her. The auction soon started. Obviously, the Pearl family didn't want to keep everyone in suspense, so they rolled out the 4 Dream Lover necklaces to start the auction. The audience let out a collective gasp at the sight of the necklaces. Phoebe sat up in her seat almost immediately. She had wanted a Dream Lover for a long time. As a matter of fact, it was only because her father had told her that there would be one up for bids that she had decided to come to the auction. "A lot consisting of 4 Dream Lover necklaces, starting bid $11 million, the auctioneer said loudly into the microphone. This immediately made most of the bidders very disappointed. Even though many of them were interested, the starting bid was already out of their range. Isaac was the first person to raise his paddle to make a bid. $12 million. He turned to Phoebe and said, "Don't worry, Phoebe. I'm definitely going to buy this for you." But before Phoebe could reply to him, the other bidders jumped in and started a bidding war. In less than a minute, they had raised the price to $25 million. Isaac looked at the people in the front row in shock and thought to himself, "These people must be nuts. Buying 4 used necklaces for $25 million? Suddenly, a woman held up her paddle and shouted, $35 million. This brought a disappointed sigh from the crowd. This bid was $10 million more than the previous one. Isaac was really crestfallen. His family was rich, but this was ridiculous. Plus, he thought that these necklaces would be a waste of money. However, he had just boasted about buying it. If he stopped now, he'd look like a fool. Just as Isaac was about to bite the bullet and raise his paddle again, Phoebe spoke up. "Forget it. I really don't want one that much. It's not worth spending so much money." But did Phoebe really mean it? Of course not. However, she didn't want Isaac to buy anything for her. But if Kevin gave her something, even if it was a cheap trinket from a kiosk at the mall, Phoebe would still treat it like a rare treasure. "All right, since you said it isn't worth it, then I won't buy it," Isaac said as he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Kevin instantly laughed when he heard this. At first, he was very impressed with Isaac's bid, but in the end, the guy had just turned out to be a show-off. "What are you laughing at, you piece of trash? Why don't you bid $40 million so you can give these necklaces to Phoebe?" Isaac scoffed. However, out of fear of being beaten up by Dalton, Isaac didn't say anything else. This really disappointed Phoebe. At first, she was excited that Isaac had made a bid for her, but now that he had gone back to insulting Kevin, she was no longer impressed with him. It was true that Kevin was just a lowly member of the Jones family, but he was a real man who dared to stand up in the face of danger. "Isaac, if you don't have anything better to do, just sit there and don't bother anyone. And if you don't want to stay here, you're free to leave," Phoebe said rudely. Then she added, "You really ought to learn when to keep your yap shut." When Phoebe talked to him like that, Isaac stopped acting so arrogant. "Phoebe, please don't be angry with me. I won't say anything else, okay?" By now, the bidding on the set of Dream Lover necklaces had already climbed to $51 million. That's when Kevin sent a text to Miss Wilson, who was sitting up front in the area reserved for Williams Media.
Hi, Kevin here. If you're wondering what happens next, then stay tuned on the Pocket FM Universe channel for more episodes.